But this is something that Twitter has made public for everybody. So if you just want to listen in, you can just use the link for the space and just put it in your browser on your desktop or any other device, and you can tune in and listen in. But if you want to interact, you want to take the speaker and interact with the audience, you have to join from your phone.
Well, while we try to wrangle Tim, can we promote some other folks from Industrial Logic?
Well, definitely. I think Joshua is here, Anthony is here, a lot of people
Drew is
from
here.
other coaches from. Absolutely. So I will request everybody to request the mic if you want to come up and join us while we get Tim on the speaker.
Hey everyone, this is Josh. Just wanted,
Hey, Josh, thank you for joining. Glad to see you here.
yeah, glad to be here. I think the entire subject of waste is really important, and getting rid of waste is also, you know, a big part of our work. So the Waste Snake blog that Tim wrote is really wonderful. If you haven't seen it, it's called Waste Snake, and it's on the Industrial Logic blog. And yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this topic. It's huge part of lean software development is getting rid of waste, and we we often just tolerate waste rather than stopping to note it down and do something about it. Maybe invest time to get rid of the waste. So curious what people think about waste in general and what they're doing about getting rid of it.
So for the audience, I have also posted a tweet on top of the space. I hope you guys are able to see it. Um, this tweet is all about the blog post that we are going to address here today. And the author of this blog is our own Tim. He's not able to join on the speaker yet, but we're hoping he'll be able to. But meanwhile, we have a lot of other coaches from IL who can address the topic as well. So we can start having a conversation so that the audience, gets some productivity from here. So the first thing that Tim has actually mentioned in his article is that people are usually in a habit, or they are habitually ignoring waste in the environment that they are working in. Why, Josh, do you think is so difficult for people to get in a habit or to start seeing the waste around them?
Well, I can answer that question with a story. Um, this story is from Alcoa, which is the aluminum company of America. And back in the late 1980s, a fellow named Paul O'Neill became their CEO. And one of the things he did was he traveled to some of the aluminum plants throughout the US, one of which was in Tennessee. And he's in Tennessee and he's walking around the aluminum plant, which is acres and acres of land. And he sees people who are sweeping sawdust onto oil spills all over the place. This is happening. And he inquires about it, and he's told by the executives, well, some of the fork trucks lift, they tend to leak some oil. So in order to make it a safe place, we don't want people slipping in the oil. We have these people that sweep the sawdust onto the oil spills. So Paul O'Neill asks, and this had been going on for decades, this practice. So Paul O'Neill asks, well, why do the forklifts leak oil? You know, the executives are like, oh, well, he's the new CEO. He doesn't know a damn thing about aluminum. He certainly doesn't know anything about forklifts. His last job was working in a paper mill. Um, Mr. O'Neill, sorry, but yeah, that's what forklifts do. They leak oil. So, we just have to do it. So Paul's looking at this whole thing saying, this is just failure. demand. These people are cleaning up after a failure of these forklifts over and over and over again, doing it for years on end. It's not even a career. It's not contributing value to the creation of aluminum products, which is what Alcoa creates. It's just dealing with an ongoing failure. So he thanks the executives, but later that day he calls some executives in Japan who make those forklift trucks, and he says, "Could you please create a forklift truck that doesn't leak oil?" And sometime later they managed to do that and sent the new forklifts to Alcoa. And basically, they were able to eliminate that job completely. Now, they didn't fire the people, they just gave them higher value work to do and got rid of the job altogether. To me, I love that story because they could have easily have kept going with that practice for decades. Even today, they could be sweeping sawdust onto oil spills, but someone took action, and and it was profound. It goes really deeper too because Paul O'Neill felt it was not dignified or respectful to be giving people that kind of work when it was always based upon a failure of a forklift. He didn't think that was dignified or graceful. He felt that if you wanted high performance, you have to treat people with dignity and respect. And that was an undignified job. That was one of the primary reasons he went after that waste and got rid of it.
That's a
Thank you
cool
for
story.
that. Yeah, that was a really cool story. Thank you for sharing that with us. So, John, you want Rasim to join the speaker? I have actually requested him to join the speaker. I don't know if he's able to, but anybody in the audience, if you want to join the speaker panel and add some comments or add a question here, you are most welcome to. Meanwhile, I'll hand it over to you, John, if you want to ask another question related to the topic.
Well, since we're having technical difficulty with Tim, I think I'll do a quick recap of the blog post itself for those who haven't read it yet. It's not long, and it's got this great image of a waste snake. And one of the things that, the main things I see in this post are first that you need to recognize waste, like you need to pay attention to it, and when you notice it, write it on a sticky and put it on the whiteboard. And the thing that surprised me is I'm like, why is it a snake? Is that and there's it's not a deep reason. It's just more of a fun reason. Is that if you start writing down waste, you're going to run out of space on your whiteboard if you put them all in a line. So um, the way Tim learned it from Martin DeVos is just loop it around. Like you um, pull that line around into an S, keep using more of the board, and then it started to look like a snake, so they called it a snake, which is just fun. But I think the main challenge I see, particularly with software, maybe it's everywhere, but the world I run in is software development, and what I see is that software developers have a remarkable tolerance for pain and waste. I don't know why that is. And I'm not saying that as a good thing. I'm saying that as a bad thing. That people uh, do this thing where they're just like, we're going to run this, but we're going to wait around, and it's going to take some time, and there's nothing to do except maybe a context switch. Oh, great. Um, and eventually it'll come back, and then I have to context switch again. And people just think that's normal. That's the unfortunate part, I think, and why it's important to call it out, to write it down, name it. It's sort of like the first step of any recovery program is admit that you have a problem. I don't know if that's why people are reluctant to call it out, or if they're just. I think people are just used to it.
Yeah, I also think this is Anthony. I also think it has a lot to do with software developers typically working alone, right? So we tend to deal with uh, wasteful work, and like you said, John, just context switch, start another piece of work, add more work in progress, and come back. When we can get back to the work. And I think there's a real value in uh, adopting a waste snake around the same time you start introducing things like ensemble, mob programming, or pair programming, because when when a group of 5 developers have to go through the same manual process, the same 20 steps to test a REST endpoint, when they're all programmers and can automate it, somebody in that group is going to realize, well, we're wasting all of our time waiting for this. So I feel like that's someone in that group can note it, put it on the waste snake, and then that's something that then they can go automate. So I definitely have had success using it with mob programming, because you're less likely to put up with those waits and wastes.
I don't know what you're saying, Anthony. I think increasing work in progress is the way to go.
Keeping everyone busy, working in parallel.
Higher
More.
WIP means higher productivity.
That's it.
All right, John. So we have Rasim on the speaker as well. Welcome, Rasim. Thank you for joining. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yeah, Rasim is good. How you doing, Manib? And happy to be a part of this space. This is actually my first space that I'll be a speaker on. Historically, I've had bad user experience with joining spaces with my phone. So if I drop, please forgive me, because it tends to just drop me out of spaces. But
well, you and Tim, apparently.
yeah, I think so. Like I might just drop any minute. But
It might be other people kicking you out. So
yeah,
it could be an.
yeah. I want to piggyback on something John said. I think why do developers tolerate waste? I think in my experience, and even myself in early in my career, it's like seen as just part of the process. It's seen as part of development. Is just there might be some painstaking, tedious aspect of it, and we just think that's just the way it is. So, coding is supposed to be hard. So, it's just par for the course.
Huh.
Like, for example, and I love talking about waste from the standpoint of refactoring, of course, my namesake, right? It's like you visit a class or a method, the method is difficult to read. So it takes you a minute to understand what the long method is doing.
Oh, that's good.
Right? But it's like most developers and me initially, we don't realize that there's a way to remove the waste. That's a form of waste. That cognitive load or the cognitive effort that it takes to understand that confusing method, that waste can be eliminated. And so that's kind of my favorite way of looking at this whole thing. And waste can happen on that micro scale from a code level, but it can also happen on a system scale and in a process, relationships between people. It's the same thing.
One thing that developers love to complain about is, these meetings are a waste of time. And they're probably not wrong most of the time, in that meetings are often talking about work when it's like, yes, but you could actually be collaborating and doing the work together instead of talking about it, instead of planning it. Why don't you take a step together? So I feel like maybe that's one. Of course, they usually don't get any traction on that complaint. They just moan because the assumption is there's nothing you can do about it. And maybe that's the larger thing that you're describing, that Tim describes in the blog, and that you're describing, is that feeling of, well, there's nothing you can do about it.
So finally, Tim is with us. Hey, Tim. Let's see if he's able to speak.
Check. Hello, I am
Hello,
Tim.
Tim. You have the
Hello.
Yes,
audio.
hello.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Finally.
Hey.
Yay. It actually exists now. Yeah, I think there's a good point to what John is saying. There's one of the things that we don't do is we don't gather evidence or any kind of numeric value. There's nothing that we can do to say, hey, we wasted time in the meeting. Well, meetings are important. That's how we collaborate. Well, gosh, I hope you collaborate more than just in meetings. But if we kept track of it and we could say, hey, you realize that we're spending per person something on the order of 8 hours of meetings per week. And during those meetings, we're not getting work done. That starts to carry a bit more value. And then how much is that per month or per year? How many more developers should we hire because we spend all of our time in meetings? Well, some meetings are good, some meetings are bad, right? So how do you classify? So it's really not just the tracking. The tracking starts the process of building a case, but then there's more to be done with that. It's a first step.
So it's also a question of how many people does this impact? How often does it recur? How heavy is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and does it really help you to get to a better solution or not? Right?
Which sounds an awful lot like that famous XKCD cartoon about, like, when should you automate something?
Yeah.
Right.
Or
It's
how much time should
1205.
you invest? What, you have the number memorized?
Yeah. I use it so much that I know that it's XKCD 1205,
Oh my gosh.
and it's called "Is It Worth the Time?" Yeah, and it's powerful because, so it's just, as far as cartoon goes, it's really not a cartoon. It's just a table. It's funny because it's true. But what they did is they looked at what's your break-even point for one person across 5 years. Now, we could say if I have a 10-person team, we're talking 6 months if it affects everybody, right? And so it's how often you do the task is across the top, and how much time you shave off is along the left side, and where they intersect. So I can say I can save 30 seconds off something I do daily. That is worth a total of 12 hours of development work to break even with that number of people in that period of time. Well, what if I have 10 people on my team and there's something that we do 5 times a day and I could shave 5 seconds off of it? Well, that's also worth 12 hours because it multiplies the savings by the people, by the day, right? By the instances. So,
Mm-hmm.
so resolving it, I think Randall Monroe did a good job of diagramming and giving us just the basic numbers. And like I said, it's only funny because it's true.
Brings up the classic case too of buying computers that are super fast. We literally just heard about some folks using the latest chip from Apple, and they're doing this particular build of a React Native point of sale system in 10 times the speed of the Intel based computers we're using. So it's like, wow, there's just speed in our tools that we could be tapping into, for an investment. Like, you look at the numbers there, what does it cost to buy that equipment versus how much time are we wasting every day? Amazing waste that could be removed probably for very little cost.
So, before we move forward, for the people who have just joined the space, I would request you all to kind of share the space. If you can see the plus button at the right bottom corner of your screens, just click on that and share this in a tweet with others so more people can join us. And if you guys would like to add your comments, your feedback, your questions, feel free to request for the mic, and we'll definitely give you a speaker, and you can share your thoughts with us. Back to you, Tim.
Sure. One of the things that I like to report, so I am not a researcher. Nobody's funding research. I'm not selling anything. Just my observation from the teams I've worked with is that the speed of delivery for software teams is dominated by three things. One of them is the number of loops or returns in the process. So not programming loops, but how many times can things come back to you after you thought they were done, right? Number two is the number and length of the waits in the process. So every handoff has a queue, right? So if I have a PR, I'm going to think I'm done. I'm going to hand it off to the PR. Some time will pass. And when the person on the other end does the review, they may return it to me. Well, when they return it to me, I'm going to have to go through that queue again to get another PR. If they return it again, I'll have to wait through the queue again. Well, what if I have 5 nested loops where it goes to a local reviewer and then to a PR and then to QA and then to security? If it comes back from the outer loop, I have to go through all the inner loops again, right? So the number and loop of loops in the process, the number and length of the waits in the process, and to Josh's point, the other one seems to be the slowness of the test suite. I don't know if that's shocking to anybody.
And so there are two things you can do. One, I think, would be, well, let's improve sort of the time, the loop time. Can we reduce the loop time? But the big win is, what can we eliminate the loop?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like if your PR person was to actually write the code with you in the room, if you guys work together, then you don't hand it off. There's no queue. Everything is in flow. Well, that eliminated a loop, which also eliminated a queue, and that's going to save time. Even if the reviewer isn't busy the whole time you're working together, maybe they're less busy. But you notice that programming time is not the major dominating factor, right? I've seen these plenty of systems. If we've gone in and done value stream maps, we tend to find that the programming part is about 5% of the total time. So if you could program twice as fast, you get a 2.5% improvement. But if you could eliminate a couple of loops, you could probably get 15 or 20% improvement.
That's where our mythical 10x developer really lives.
Yeah, I think so. Well, the Waysnake doesn't fix that, but when people start to record what they're waiting on, then you start to see that, right? So I'm waiting for my PR. My PR guy is waiting for me to finish fixing my code so they can push it on. But also the testers have to wait for a testing environment. Now, this is, of course, assuming that we have different departments and there's handoffs. So, but we could see those. And if we write them down, then we'll start to recognize problems in our process. Maybe it'll help us get rid of some.
So Tim, let's talk about a little bit about the exact, waste snake technique, and how this works, and the different elements related to it.
Sure. So again, this was, I think it was invented by Martine de Vos. She taught it to me somewhere around 2004, 2005, and we've used it since. It really is as simple as having a common space, virtual or physical, where there's space set aside and the ability for people to post a note. Now, I like it when we say, hey, what time of day is it? How long did it delay me? For things that are, active waits, where you're just idling. When things have to be pushed into a blocked column, that's kind of wasteful too. Well, we can record when we put it into the blocked column and how long it was till it was then unblocked. So really that's the trick, is just know what was it, how much did it delay us, and then, at some point we will collect these up together and compare them and group them. We may find that we have 15 issues that had to wait for 3 days for a code review. well, I can tell you where to spend some time fixing it. But the idea is to make it obvious. There is, by the way, a really nice article. Let me point you to somebody. It was from, oh, that's the wrong one. Hold on just a second. I saved it so we could talk about it. I have an article that I had copied from, I think it's projectmanager.com. It's a blog. I'm looking for it now. Project Owner blog. I found it. Project Owner
If you
blog.
can tweet it, I can put it on top of this, space so everybody can, look at that.
Yeah. So this one is a much longer blog than mine. I like mine better, but I may be biased. So the Product Owner blog, what's nice about it is they did show specifics. They showed, what their waste snake looks like. They showed how it filled up so much they had to move the tail to make room for new entries. And then at the end of I think they were doing sprints. Yeah, they were doing sprints. So at the end of their 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they gathered them together and grouped them. And their groups were meetings, unsurprisingly, support issues, learning, one-timers, and something called stupid discussions. I'm not sure what that is. But once they listed those, the next thing they did is they drew a picture of a piggy bank on the wall. And they took all the wastes that were actually investments in the future and they moved them to the piggy bank. So now you have things that you spent time on that weren't the work. And some of those were investments in the future. And what are you going to do with the rest, right? And those are grouped and considered. And they came up with experiments to try to drive it down. So that's pretty much the mechanism. I think that if you zoom in on some of these, you can see some of the cards. They might have the time. I think they do have the time written on them in hours, maybe. Yeah, 5 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour. So I thought it was a nice article, and it certainly does show images of a waste snake growing over the course of a week or two. So take a look at it. I've tweeted it. It's kind of a handy article to share. By the way, the reason I wrote mine, one of our friends, Steve, oh no, what's Steve's last name? I just hate it when I forget somebody's last name. Steve had asked me to write one because I had talked about waste snakes. And so he said, well, can you write an article about that? I would love to have an article about that. And that's really the motivation. So hopefully mine will point you to other people's articles and make you aware of the idea that you have wastes. And by tracking them, you can build a case for fixing them.
I like the idea of tracking it because, in what is often an adversarial relationship between developers and management, it's like developers might, let's say they're attuned to certain types of waste and they say, oh, can we do something about this? But to the manager, it might just seem like, fine, you're complaining. But if you build a case, managers aren't bad people or dumb, and like actually show how much time, how often, how many people.
That's fair. I have a little story where once we had managers who, they hadn't been developers, so we cut them a break for that. But these managers kept telling people, no, we don't want you doing any refactoring. We don't want you wasting time on that. Okay, well, they didn't know. So what we did is we went through the commit histories in the code base, and we showed them, we have this one file, and of the last, 6 months, over 85% of all bugs had to be fixed in that file. That's where it lived. That's where the bug was. When the managers saw that, they saw that list of bugs, and that's all just in one source file. They looked at it and said, well, why haven't you fixed it then? By God, fix it. Well, that's what we've been asking. You've been telling us no. So we went and fixed it. So again, just have to build a case. Sometimes people don't quite understand. That's also why I have an article about understanding cruft and refactoring on our blog. And you can find that. It's a bit more recent, so it should be in the top like 10 or so.
All right, another announcement for the audience. Please go ahead and follow the host of this space, co-host, and other speakers, because this is going to be one of the first of the series of Twitter Spaces that Industrial Logic is going to hold. And there's going to be a lot of other topics that we are going to be covering. We're going to be doing this on a weekly frequency, so every Friday, 2 p.m. Central Time, we are going to be here. So if you guys are interested in our blog posts or other articles that our coaches wrote, you can actually go to our website, and all that detail you can, if you can go to profile description for the host, you can get all those links there. And again, I'm requesting everybody to share this space. Just click on the blue plus button at the right bottom corner of your screens, and that way you'll be able to share the space with others so more people can join us. All right.
If there's a particular blog post that you'd like to hear us discuss, hey, let us know. That's easy.
We would love to hear your feedback. So feel free to leave feedback on the space. You can add comments underneath it, and you can leave your feedback so we can use that to improve our interactions. But this is meant to be an interactive space where you can interact with the coaches at IL and share thoughts. So feel free to request for the mic. You can also send a direct message to our host or myself as a co-host, and we will try to include them in our conversations.
One of the more popular questions is what really defines waste, and I think that's a good place to start, maybe with a team. So I don't like it, therefore it's waste, and I put it on the board, and that means you have to fix it. Is not how this works. It is not your place where you can order people to do as you like, right? When you list a waste, later on we will assess, consider, use that feedback, and make decisions about how to improve. And so sometimes people, I don't get paid enough. Boom, there's a waste. Well, that's not what we're looking for, and that may be a problem, and you probably should take it up with somebody individually, and even build a case for that. But that's not what this is about. So something's on the board. Does that mean we have to take care of it? No, you choose which waste you're going to knock down, what you can influence and improve. But I like what Lean has done in the Lean world. They have the 8 wastes, and right. Downtime is the acronym I like. It is D for defects. There's overproduction, which is making too much, right? Waiting, one of my favorites. Non-utilized talents. So if we have UX designers, but nobody listens to them, that's non-utilized talent. Transportation, which is work moving from one place to another. Inventory, which is a bunch of stuff piled up that's not going out the door. Classic, if you do big batch releases, think about, you're holding up a release because there's one other feature you want to get in there. Well, that one little feature is holding 200 other features hostage, and they can't go out the door until the one's done. That inventory is a kind of waste. We could be helping people, but instead we're stockpiled. Motion is how much busyness your developer has, right? And there's a lot of tools out now that will claim to measure productivity, but they'll really tell you how busy everybody is, as if busyness was a reasonable substitute or surrogate for productivity. And of course, the last one is extra processing, and that goes to things like gold plating. So overproduction is making stuff we don't have to make. Extra processing is going too far, right? Doing more of it than we need to get it in front of people. So if you want to look at that, any place you want to look for downtime and 8 wastes of Lean, you'll find posters. There's some really nice ones out there and articles. I think I've even written 1 or 2 at some point. do some research. Those are things I think that make a good line. The product owner blog said they just chose to use anything that isn't their sprint work. I know they're sprinting, but that was good enough for them.
Sorry,
got bonus
anything
waste I
that
can mention.
isn't. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, John.
No,
you all interested in a bonus waste?
Give us a bonus waste.
This is one that's not in the 8 wastes, and I find it super, super strange that it's not there, because to me it's one of the biggest wastes we encounter in many industries. Is personnel churn. Personnel churn. They don't mention it whatsoever, but if you start losing people, and they especially have a lot of knowledge about your systems and how things work, boy, have you just lost a lot, and it's huge amount of waste. If you're experiencing a lot of personnel churn, you got a big problem to solve.
Exactly, because here's a story with one of the clients, I was working at. So one of the people they had working, he was an old timer with the company. So obviously he had a lot of knowledge in the line of work that he was doing, and that procedure or that knowledge wasn't actually documented everywhere, or was not in a form where it was shareable with new people joining the company. So he had couple of newbies joining him, but then he left the company, and then the newbies guys, the newcomers, they didn't really know the process or didn't have the knowledge retained, so they couldn't do anything. And then they had to hire that same guy on a contract, bring him back, only so that they could move the work forward. So we always see these kind of situations within organizations where there's employee turnover and the knowledge, and they work in silos and the knowledge goes with them.
That's really good, Josh, especially because people can leave for many reasons, many different reasons, and they have an immediate impact on your ability to deliver, which means you better start tackling those reasons.
Yeah, maybe it's considered movement out the door.
This is great though, because I've Tim, I've wondered about how do the classic 8 wastes map into software development, and I guess I'd never heard anyone talk about that before. Not like down the list. So that was really cool.
There's one of the early chapters in the Lean software development book actually does the mapping from the 8 forms of waste to software development.
Yeah, I think the credit goes to Mary Poppendick and Tom Poppendick for doing that comparison.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're here and you can follow them, try following them. Otherwise, just try reading their stuff. Very worthwhile.
I think Joshua has a video on his YouTube channel. I think he has an in-person interview with both of them. I really liked that episode, Josh. It gave
Yes.
great insight to their work.
Yeah, I think I spoke to them at a conference in Norway or something like that once. So they're wonderful people, and yes, I'll just underscore what Tim said is definitely study their lean books. There's a whole series of them, and they'll change your whole perspective on things. So highly recommended. But yeah, the YouTube show is the Modern Agile Show, and it's the Poppendyke. You have to figure out how to spell that.
Definitely. All right. Yeah, Anthony and Tim, you were about to say something. Sorry.
Go ahead, Anthony.
No, I think I'm good.
Oh, okay. So your mic was unmuted, so that's why I thought you were going to say something. So Tim, what happens? So you have all the waste. You're in a habit now to see waste, to visualize it using the waste snake. But what if you feel that it's beyond your powers to fix a waste? What do you do in that kind of situation?
Well, that's a good question. So there are different approaches, right? There are some things. Let's talk about your sphere of influence, right? Let's say you are a member of a development team. There are certainly going to be things that you could just do. If your team members agree, you could just try it, right? So they mentioned in the one article, they made it a rule that if you feel like your conversation is not helpful, you say the word mango, and everybody knows that that means this is probably a conversation we could stop. Some people use the word Elmo, which means enough, let's move on. So, within there's things you can do that are free and you just do those, right? Then if it goes into issues of, schedule or the talent base in your organization, the membership, um, the goals that you're shooting for, or maybe you need someone to help you navigate the organization. Maybe you need help in the politics and all. That's a good time to talk to a manager. I refer to these as the T's: time, talent, target, treasury, and trust. And I have an article on that somewhere. I'll try to post that. Those things are management issues. If you are a technician and you think you can solve a culture problem by changing how you write your code, you're probably going to be wrong, right? At some point, you start to enlist other people to the work, and one of the best people to start your enlistment is your immediate supervisor, your boss, your grand boss, your great grand boss, right?
Grand boss.
So often I recommend that, and I think if you have made a good case, they're willing to try things. They're trying really hard to do a good job. And that's Don Gray always reminds me that almost all the time, almost all the people are just trying to be helpful, right?
Yeah.
But they just don't have the information, or maybe they're out of ideas, or maybe they've just been so worn down that they're not thinking about making things better, right? They may have lost their curiosity and their urge, their energy for making change. But if you can enlist and provide a partnership, it's amazing how much working with other people can energize you. And they need that too. So yeah, take it up the flagpole. Enlist your colleagues. If you can, enlist your bosses. Now, I have seen, by the way, this not work. And where I've seen it not work, one of the teams, the scrum master became angry because somebody said that they thought that, I don't remember what it was, they thought that they were wasting too much time on estimates or something. And the scrum master got really mad and refused to allow them to record those things as waste. And so the whole team just quit recording anything as waste.
Problem solved.
Problem solved. We'll just not change anything. It'll be fine. We'll just live as we are. And you probably could for a while. I mean, and everybody gets tired of change now and then. But I think the secret is that if you really want to have a great team, it's really important that what you're doing is working to make next month better than last month. And when you stop doing that, you're going to get into this dreadful sameness of work.
I wanted to take us back a bit, Tim, to your comment on whether if it's an issue of time or schedule, but it's something that's within the team's realm to correct. One thing that we've had success with is if you always have to find yourself going back and asking for time, and there's nervousness of putting your sprint at risk every time you ask to improve something or eliminate a waste. If you can negotiate a budget up front so everyone gets X amount of hours a week to address the waste, and then it becomes an expectation, right? And hopefully that helps build a habit.
I completely agree. That's a great process. And if you can stay within the budget, you're great. You're golden.
So a lot of times what I have seen in organizations is especially the word waste, like people are reluctant to call their work waste, and especially when 99% of what they do uh, is actually, in terms of lean, it is considered waste, whether necessary or unnecessary. So how do you, what kind of mindset you need to cope with uh, the word waste and actually accepting that there does exist a lot of waste in the way we work today, and there's always room for improvement.
Josh, I remember once you were talking about how long Toyota's been doing continuous improvement, and I think that it was your statement that they haven't run out yet. 20, 30, 40 years that they've been doing it, and they've not run out of ideas for improving things yet. Is that right?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just sorry. I was just talking to a handyman here. So, but well, no, I mean, I don't think any company ever runs out of ways to find, right? And it goes through waves, and it's different management philosophies and personalities and stuff like that. I mean, we've probably seen a lot of companies get pretty complacent, right? Where I mean, I've seen companies that are very wealthy where there's a tremendous amount of waste. I mean, literally, where like literally a person would say to us, she said, we could have done this in 2 days. Instead, it takes us 2 months because we have so much work in process. So 2 months versus 2 days. Okay, huge amount of waste. But that company that year made so much money that everyone got the biggest bonuses they'd ever gotten. And in a context like that, how likely are they going to be to aggressively go after waste? So I think a lot of it has to do with, the desire to continuously remove waste. And even companies like Toyota, I think, struggle with it. And then there's like the invisible waste, where a lot of the software things that happen in software are very invisible, right? We don't realize that waste is happening because it's just invisible to us. It's not like a physical thing we can see. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, Tim, but
Well, I think you did.
okay.
I think that was a good answer. Yeah, we're not going to run out. There is, if you read the book by John Gall called Systemantics or the Systems Bible, it got renamed a few times. In there, he says that most human processes are maybe 5% efficient. Maybe. We find again in software that most organizations that we've checked, programming is about 5% of the job of getting software out the door, and the rest of it often is just sitting there. So, what is value to you? And I like that Lean says, well, there are things that directly provide value to the end user, to the customer, to the community of the product, and then there are things that don't. And all of the things that don't are technically waste, but some of those wastes are necessary. They're maybe hygienic, right? Sweeping the floor is one of Josh's examples he uses. Sweeping the floor at the factory. Well, is that value added in making cars? Well, no. But if you don't do it, people are going to slip and fall and get hurt, and people are going to push things around. It's going to be filthy. Grit's going to get into stuff. If you don't do it, then you're even worse at making cars. So I like to refer to those as hygienic, right? And in software, learning is hygienic. We have to constantly be learning, or we're constantly having to muddle through, even worse, because we don't know how the system actually works. So I would consider those to be things to think about, right? And you can come to terms with the idea of waste. There is waste as in, this is stupid, we should never do it. And I understand that that's upsetting, but you can say lean waste, maybe if you put a prefix on it, that lean specifically means that it doesn't directly add value. And some of that is necessary anyway, right? Some communication isn't programming. Well, you can't just program, you have to communicate and collaborate, right? And if you just sit down and start programming without knowing what your users want, or understanding how you're going to release it, or realizing which parts of the system are involved, you probably aren't going to do as good a job. So there is necessary meeting, necessary collaboration, maybe even necessary documentation, right? And so you have to decide which wastes are pure waste, like waiting, and which wastes are hygienic waste or necessary waste. And that's what we do after we filled in the waste snake, right? At the end, when we pull it all together, we look through it, and if we can just drop a waste, that's fine. But again, you asked about what happens if it's out of our sphere of influence. Well, actually, I think you were asking, what if it's out of our sphere of control, but it's within our sphere of influence? And what we can do, of course, is push our influence outward.
Mhm.
So our boss can inform our grand boss can inform that other department, right? We can eventually pull something together that can save us literally person months per year of effort. It's like getting free developers. And if you don't think they're going to go for that, I don't understand why not.
Your cousins are probably in the same shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like there's this certain level of psychological safety, I think, that has to be there in order for this to work. Because, in some situations, for example, a developer might think, you know, can this be used or weaponized against me? Or what if someone, lists something that you, as a coach or maybe a scrum master, you really don't like that? What do you have to say about that?
I think you're right. I think psychological safety can't be overstated in this case, right? If we can't call out a problem, then we have normalized deviation, right? There's a lot of stories about that. In pilots, for a long time, the co pilot wasn't allowed by rank to contradict the pilot because the pilot was the master of the craft and the co pilot was, the intern or apprentice. They didn't count. So they didn't ask questions they should have asked, and it resulted in uh, air collisions and bad landings and damages and deaths. Likewise, it was the same in operating theaters where the various nurses and other people in attendance were to be subservient to the primary surgeon and to not question the surgeon's actions and choices. And of course, that also resulted in deaths. I don't remember the name of the book we need to look at, but um, it's been a big move to make it important, necessary, expected that people speak with candor where it's important. And that would include surgical theaters and the cockpits of airplanes. But why would that not also include the software pits where people are working? We're in our groups and we see somebody doing something that's going to cause some sysadmin to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out what's going on, shaking his head and making calls. We don't need that, right? If we could see that, we wouldn't make that mistake. And so again, we start thinking about psychological safety is our ability to question and confront safely other people's ideas. So I might say, I think this is waste. Maybe we shouldn't do this. If I'm going to, that's going to go against me on my annual review, which by the way, annual reviews are another kind of waste. But if that's going to go against me, then I'm going to hold my tongue. And the culture may be, you're not allowed to bring up problems. Well, that means we're just going to have a lot of problems. So yeah, I think psychological safety is key. And this also not only leverages the psychological safety within the team, but it also expands it. When we all see that we have the same problems, it draws us into a better shape. And when we see the problems being solved, then we start to trust and respect our peers more. That kind of forward movement is motivational and it's valuable.
So, with that, I've just pinned a tweet at the top of this space. This is the Modern Agile Show, episode number 26, and that's where Joshua is interviewing with Mary and Tom Hoppendake. So, you guys might want to look at that. It's very informative, and you'll get a lot of insight on the topic that we are discussing. So, now we are entering in the last 5 to 10 minutes of this space. Um, we would really love to get interaction from the audience and your feedback, your comments. If you have any questions, please feel free to request the mic, and we would love to have you on the speaker panel and listen to your thoughts as well. Meanwhile, John, you wanna? add something?
No, you see me muting and unmuting all the time. That's just me.
That just gives me an idea if somebody wants to speak. That's why I'm pushing it over to you.
Well, I was thinking about what Josh said about um, companies with lots of money. I think that may have answered a puzzle for me, which is like why has uh, agility in general, modern agile, specifically around like the extreme programming practices, why is it still the outlier, and why are big major companies able to move forward without it? And the answer is money. If you can throw money at the problem, and you're willing to bleed money, you can do without those things. Uh, and I think what we're saying is you don't have to bleed money. It's sort of it's kind of like thinking more like a startup where money and time are slim.
I think that's an important point, that if your margins are fat enough, you really don't have to be very efficient. And I'm sure there are organizations out there that have survived being woefully inefficient for a very long time. So I'm not going to say that you can't be successful, you can't have a successful product, you can't make money if you have waste in your process. I think that would fly in the face of observation and reality. But you could probably do better, do more, do happier, if you didn't have to suffer through the wastes and the weights and the nonsense.
I think it also depends on the way an organization incentivizes its people, right? Uh, how they give out their bonuses. What is the criteria they use to reward people? Is it just, you know, making your deadlines, or is it something more than that?
Yeah, Tim, you mentioned happiness, which I think is very important, because I said, you're bleeding money because I was speaking sort of business. But all these things, and Munib, what you shared is that um, if people are happier when they're more effective, and when they can directly see the impact of their work, it's much more rewarding. It's an emotional thing. It's not just financial. And if you could see that this change I make actually impacts this uh, user or customer in a positive way immediately, that's a huge boost. I think most programmers love that feeling, and well, I would love to see more joy in this industry.
I have just one more little quick story here. One of my friends contacted me. He was working at a company where we had done some considerable work. We spent some years there. And he contacted me to let me know. He says, Tim, today I had a job to do. I knew it was going to take me at least a good week. But when I opened up the code base, everything I needed was already there. And it was actually easy to add. And I finished that job in one morning. I wanted to let you know that this is what is possible because of the work we've all done together.
Ooh. Wow. That's sweet music.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more of those. I'm
So,
also throwing up a post real quick. G. Paul Hill talks about profluence, which is the feeling that things are moving forward, and what a motivational factor that is. So I'm gonna tweet that out, and do take a look at that. That's a very important concept.
all right. I think we are coming to an end to the space. So I would like to get closing remarks from everybody on the speaker, and then probably we can wind this up. Starting with Josh.
Just some summary thoughts.
Yeah, closing remarks.
Yeah.
And how,
Well,
I mean, a little bit about how your experience with the space as well, and any feedback for future.
yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for everyone who showed up. We're excited about this. I was a Clubhouse user, so um, I've had a little more experience in this kind of thing, and it's we would have loved to have more participation from the audience. Maybe next time. Um,
Hey, Tim, if you can mute your mic because we're getting some feedback. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead, Joel.
I just summarize by saying that I think to me it's what John mentioned earlier, and there is a joy in getting rid of waste. And so I think you need to somehow structure things to allow people to get rid of waste without having to ask permission, and then go deeper and deeper into it. There's just waste is everywhere. Even building a feature and you put it in production, and then if nobody uses it, guess what? It's a huge amount of waste. So do you have metrics on usage of features in production? Lean Startup teaches a ton of things about how to validate or invalidate features before you ever even build them. So are you doing that practice? I mean, it's a career-long endeavor to get better and better at spotting and removing waste. So I think it's a fantastic topic. I'm glad Tim wrote the blog, and I think the waste snake is a great technique. So
Awesome. Next, John, would you like to say something?
I don't know. I just feel like I'm there's so much to learn and I love it all. I'm soaking it in. Like I will raise my hands and admit I've I haven't read a Poppendieck book yet. I plan to change that.
Awesome. Anthony?
Yeah, I think I guess my last thought is if you embark on starting a waste snake, you may find it hard to identify waste in the beginning, but push through it. Just like our technical practices, the more that you practice it, the more that you will start seeing waste in your processes. And I found that at some point you'll get to a point where you can't unsee waste, and that's a great place for everyone to be.
Thank you for that. And lastly, we'll go to Tim. Tim?
I would say that always remember to put curiosity over judgment. And the key to having a better career is to always make sure that next month is better than last month.
Continuous improvement. That's what Lean is all about. All right, I think we will wrap this up for today, but this is part one of a long series of Twitter Spaces that Industrial Logic is going to host going forward. So, for the audience, thank you so much for joining us. We would like you to interact more with us, so for the next time when you guys join us, please follow the host and co-host and the rest of the speaker panels. So as soon as we announce a space, you guys are aware of it, and whenever you see a space post, you can actually set a reminder for that. So Twitter will notify you as soon as the space starts. For those of you who are joined through your desktop or some other devices, this Twitter Spaces app is more user friendly or has more features for you to interact when you join from your Twitter phone app. So rather than joining from your desktop or your tablets, try joining from your phones because it's going to allow you to request for mic and interact with us more. We would love to hear your feedback on today's space. Uh, so just go to Industrial Logic's profile, and over there you can see the Twitter post for this space, and you can add comments in there. So at the end, thank you so much for everybody for joining, and Friday is almost here, so have a great weekend, everyone. See you guys next Friday.
Woot woot.
And with that, Julius, you can end the space. Thank you.